review Shiur or Daf Ches. We start on Daf Zayin on the base of the Mishnah. The Mishnah basically says, the Mishnah records the Makkos between Rabbi and the Rabbanon. When the pasuk says "V'noshla barzel min ha'etz," right? The person, the classical case of somebody chayav golos, one of the classical cases which is in the pasuk is if somebody's chopping wood and the barzel slips from the eitz. That's the lashon of pasuk. Noshla barzel min ha'etz. Rabbi and Rabbanon have a machlokes what that actually refers to. According to the Rabbanon, let's start with the Rabbi. According to Rabbi, it's referring to the noshla barzel min ha'etz means that the barzel, the axe which you're using, causes the wood of the tree or the wood that you're chopping to fly and kill somebody. So the wood is killing somebody. And according to the Chachamim, no, it's where the actual axe disconnects one part from the other. Noshla barzel min ha'etz means that the barzel slips from the eitz, from the wooden handle. So and therefore they have a machlokes, a two-way machlokes, meaning machlokes exact opposites of when you chayiv and when you part. According to Rabbi, if the handle slips out, if the axe slips out of the handle, is not chayiv golos because that's not noshla barzel min ha'etz. According to Chacham, you are good because that's mamish what the pasuk's talking about. Conversely, in the case where the wood which you're chopping flies and kills somebody, it's the exact opposite. In that case, Rabbi will say goyla because that's taka what the pasuk is saying, according to his opinion. Chacham will say ena goyla because according to the noshla barzel min ha'etz in the previous case is referring to the previous case where the axe itself gets dislodged one half from the other, the metal from the wood. So that's the Mishnah. So the Gemara wants to understand a little bit the reasoning. So the Gemara starts off with the Brisa, which says that the Gemara starts off with the Brisa, which says that Rabbi says to the Chacham two rayas that the noshla barzel min ha'etz, two proofs that the noshla barzel min ha'etz is referring to the wood that you're chopping slipping and flying out and killing somebody. One is that the pasuk doesn't say noshla barzel mi itzoi, noshla barzel min ha'etz. Doesn't say from its wood, which sounds like from its handle. Min ha'etz sounds like the eitz which you're cutting. And right number two is gzeir shava. Just like the eitz earlier on in the pasuk, it says you weren't going to cut a tree, you're going to cut wood. Lichros eitz. And just like over there, it's talking about the tree that you're cutting, and the wood eitz is used. So too over here, where the wood eitz is used, it's referring to the eitz that you're cutting. The noshla barzel min ha'etz, the eitz that you're cutting gets slipped out. That's two proofs from there. And then finally, then Ruchi Barashi says another way of explaining the machlokes Rabbi Rabbanim by saying that they're arguing whether yashem l'masaris, yashem l'mikra. In other words, do we give primacy? Do we doirish the pasuk the way it's read or the way it's written? What's going to make a difference over here? So we say like this: the way it's read is the noshal. The noshal means that it slipped. So that sounds like when the barzel slipped from the eitz. So that's what the Chacham is saying. The barzel itself is slipping. But according to Rabbi, he says no. The ikar way you darshan is the way it's written, and the way it's written is the noshal can also be read v'nishal. Doesn't read the noshal more than v'nishal. Could also be read v'nishal. V'nishal means that the barzel caused something else to slip. Nishal barzel and eitz, the barzel caused the eitz to split, and that's pshat. Arguing about yeshem l'masaris, yeshem l'mikra. The Gemara challenges that by saying what do you mean. We see in the Gemara, we see somewhere else, and Amor says that Rabbi always holds yeshem l'mikra. So how can you say over here that he holds yeshem l'masaris? The Gemara basically answers that you're right. Normally he holds yeshem l'mikra, but over here he holds yeshem l'masaris when he has two reasons to, and that's why he gives two reasons. One, and avoid, because he understands that he needs to prove the fact that even though usually I hold yashem l'mikra, over here it's yashem l'masar. Then the Gemara discusses a case which will be an afkamina between the Rabbi and the Rabbanan, a case where somebody threw a piece of earth. It hit a date, and the date then fell and hit somebody. So the Gemara says that this is machlokes Rabbi Rabbanan. Rabbi, you say Rabbanan. Let's start with the Rabbanan. Rabbanan who say that we're talking about the actual thing you're using slips out, so you're not going to be chayav golos. Right? If the earth would have killed somebody, that's considered. But here the earth hits a date, and the date hits somebody. That's not what the pasuk's talking about. And Rabbi will say, no, this is similar to the noshla barzel min ha'etz, where you're cutting wood and the wood flies out. So even though it's not the thing which you're holding which kills, so you might say pshita, it's obvious. What you're telling me, you just give me another example. You might say no, it's not the same, because in the case of cutting the wood, you're directly coming into contact with the wood, right? You're coming into contact with the wood. Over here, your hand is not coming directly into contact. I might think it's koyach koycha. I might think it's more indirect. It's not your direct koyach. It's koyach koycha. And therefore, even Rabbi would exempt you. Even Rabbi would say patur k'mashma lana. No. And then the Gemara finishes up by saying, okay, you're telling me that according to Rabbi, this is not called indirect. It's not called koyach koycha. It's not called secondary degree of your koyach. Then when would Rabbi consider it koyach koycha? The Gemara basically says a more removed case where you actually threw a piece of earth and the earth hit the twig and the twig hit the date and then the date hit somebody. That would be called koyach koycha, which should be parts from the gods. So that is a discussion of the first Mishnah. Then in the second Mishnah that we're discussing today, the Mishnah discusses the case of Zorik Evan the Shus Rabim, that is Goyla. Gemara is going to explain what the Chiddush is. And then says that Rabbi Yaakov is an exception, that sometimes you can throw to the Shus Rabim, not Goyla, if the person the person being killed, actually came to the scene after the stone already left your hand. You already, right? And then the guy puts his head out, that's not considered included in goals. You only chayav goals when at the time when he threw the stone, the person was there. You just didn't know, you just weren't aware. But if he came along later, after the stone was already out of your hand, he came into that space where the stone was going to fall, so then you part from goals. Another case which you part from Golos, and we're going to take two more cases where you part from Golos. One is that from the case of Yar, we learn that it has to be a place where both the Mazik and the Nizik have Rishus to go. But in the case where the Nizik, the person being killed, walks into your Chatzah without Rishus, you're not Chayav Golos. And finally, another limit from Yar, Abba Shol says that just like when you're cutting wood, it's an optional thing. You're just cutting wood for your own fireplace or whatever. So you only chayav golos when you're involved in something which is an optional activity. But if you're involved in a mitzvah, you're never going to be chayav golos, and therefore, Ava Makkos b'nei, Rabbi is Talmid, a father educating his child, a Rav educating his child, or that shliach bezin involved giving Makkos, and he overdoes it somehow, and he kills him. In all those situations, you're parted from golos. So those are the three cases in the Mishnah: Rishus Rabim, Rishus HaMazik, which the Nizik doesn't have Rishus to go to, and mitzvah activities. Those are three topics discussed in the Mishnah. The Gemara first of all deals with Rishus Rabim. So just a second, Rishus Rabim. If you throw an Evan to Rishus Rabim, you chayav golos. Rishus Rabim is full of people. What are you doing throwing a stone to Rishus Rabim? Mamish mazid. You carve the mazid. For sure, you shouldn't get golos. Golos is only for shoygeg. The Gemara answers by saying a number of stages, but basically, first of all, it says you're knocking down your wall. And it's not throwing your stone, which is totally irresponsible. You're doing something which is necessary. The Gemara says still, it's Rishus Rabim. You should have checked before. The Gemara says Balaylo. The Gemara says at night. You should also check. At the end of the day, you have to check. So the Gemara finally says that we're talking about a situation. It wasn't a real Rishus Rabim. It was Soisis Koisil Ashba. It's a garbage heap where people use it, taka, and that's why it's called Rishus Rabim. But it's a garbage heap. It's not really Rishus Rabim, and therefore it's not such amazing. It's just a second. So what type of ashba we're talking about? Ashba is an ashba which lots of people use. It's weiter. You should. It's a pesher. It's considered karav l'mezin. Shouldn't be chayav golos. And if nobody goes there, it's like a deserted ashba. We once upon a time used, but now the garbage dump isn't used anymore. The garbage heap isn't used. So then it's an oinus. What are we talking about? So basically, Papa says that we're talking about a situation where it's sometimes used. What's mean is sometimes used. So it gives us. So we do two. We explain that it's talking about an ashba which people use by laila but not by yoim. People use this heap to relieve themselves. That's what they use it for by night, not by day. There's people around; they're not going to relieve themselves in an ashba by day. But there are once in a while, in extraordinary circumstance, somebody will use it by day. So we explain in such a situation, he's not considered a pesheya. Why is he not considered a pesheya? Because at the end of the day, it's not. He's cutting he's knocking down his wall by day, and really nobody uses it by day. However, he's not considered a oinus because at the end of the day, once in a while, sometimes people are there. So we're talking about that situation which generally is not used. Once in a while, it's used, and that's the type of Rishus Rabim that we're talking about the Yichayev gods. Then we move on to Rabbi ben Yaakov, which is not necessarily Machlokes on the Tanakh, but a separate din, that if the guy, the nerag, sticks his head out after the Evan goes out of the hand of the Mazik, of the Hoyreg, the person killing, you're not Chayav golos. So where's this coming from? So the Brisa, we record a Brisa which says that from the word Motzah implies that the Evan finds the person, but not that the person finds the Evan. Where he finds kind of we're not talking about a situation where the person being killed creates a situation. Rather, it's the stone finds a person, but not that the person finds the stone. So the Gemara says, Stira, you're telling me that whenever it says Umatzah, the word Umatzah implies that the thing was already in existence, right? The person's head was already there when the heavens. In the case of, in a different case, we find the punkt vakar, that umatzah, finding in the case where a person is being goyal, is redeeming his te'achuzah, and we say you can only redeem his te'achuzah when, Brisa says, when his financial circumstances change. Were he be able to be paid it straight away, you can't come later and want to be paid it. Right? Umatzah, prat the matzah. Only if you later, you find the means to redeem it. But were you to have the means at the time of the sale, you just didn't want it for whatever reason, then it's not included in the, you don't have the right to force a lekeach to sell you back the steachuzah. So there we see that umatzah is punkt hakar, that umatzah is you later find the situation. So why can't we say the same over here? That bagolos, the umatzah is when the guy's head comes later. The Gemara basically says that umatzah itself goes neither way. It's to do with inyan of the Christ, to do with the context. Over here, the context, over there, shall we say, in the case of geula steachuzah, redeeming a steachuzah, which you sold and you want to redeem it, umatzah is dumi the visigayod, it's coming after the word visigayod. Visigayod means that you can afford something. So implies that the financial situation changed, something changed, there's something new. In our case, where umatzah is coming in the context of the yar, so we say that shayava Israel by yar umatzah Israel. So just like talking about an existing situation, just like the yar is something which is already there, so too we understand the umatzah is also. Finally, we go on to discuss the final case in the Mishnah, which is the case of that we learned from the word in the pasuk yar from yar. Yeah, the chatavas eitzim, cutting wood is rishus, so it excludes any situation where you're involved in a mitzvah. The Gemara asks, just a second, why are you assuming that the chatavas eitzim, the cutting of the wood, is rishus? There's many situations where you could cut wood for a mitzvah. You're cutting wood for a sukkah, you're cutting wood for the atzei marachim, and it's there. So, and nevertheless, the Torah says you chayv go. The Torah doesn't say chatavas eitzim durshus, just chatavas eitzim, cutting wood. Maybe you're cutting wood for the mitzvah, and that's also included in Gola. So why are you excluding other types of mitzvah activities? The Gemara answers, no, it's not true. There's no situation of cutting wood for a mitzvah. Because ultimately, if you had wood for your sukkah, you had wood for the atzei marach already, you wouldn't need a cut. And from that fact, if you had wood, you wouldn't need a cut, is mukhrach, is a raya. There's no mitzvah per se in cutting. It's just if you need a cut, you cut. It's a hechsher mitzvah. But if you have, and therefore it's taken on a mitzvah. And so there's no situation in the whole Torah of cutting wood, which is a mitzvah. And since there's no situation of cutting wood, which is a mitzvah, so therefore we exclude any situation where you're involved in a mitzvah. That's the original answer that Rava gives to the question posed to him about maybe chatavas eitzim the mitzvah. He says, no, there's no such situation because it's just a hechsher mitzvah. Rabbi asked the kasha to Rava from our Mishnah. Ava Makkos name Rabbi said Talmidai. The Ava Makkos is also a type of mitzvah where if it's only necessary in certain circumstances. If, in other words, it's chinuch, you're educating your child. If the education of your child requires that you hit him, he's not behaving, so then you hit him. But if he's learning, then you wouldn't need to hit him. So the raya that works, that's considered a mitzvah, and the Mishnah considers it a mitzvah. It's a raya that we consider something a mitzvah, even if it's not necessarily needs to be done. And my answer is no. Ava Makkos B'nai is always. Ava Makkos B'nai isn't just. Ava Makkos B'nai isn't just. Oh, if you need to hit him in order to educate him, so then you hit him. No, hitting is always serves a purpose because the Gemara says that learns out of a pasuk the apagab the gomer. Even if he's learning, even if he's a fine Talmud, there's once in a while it's good to hit him. So finally, Rabbi says a different pshat. Different pshat meaning to answer our original question of how we know that chatavas eitzim is talking about rishus. He says a different approach. It's not pshat that chatavas eitzim is never a mitzvah. Maybe it's true that chatavas eitzim is never a mitzvah, but that's not where we're coming from. We know that chatavas eitzim has to be talking about rishus from the word v'asher. V'asher yav Yisrael bayar implies somebody who so happened to come into a forest, and therefore wherever it says asher, we understand that it's talking about rishus, and therefore we exclude mitzvah scenarios from golos. Then the Gemara challenges this. You're telling me that whenever it says asher implies a rishus. There's other psukim which in the pasuk isha shayitma v'lo yischata. So only becomes tameh and goes into the Beis Hamikdash is chay of kares, and there it uses the word asher yitma. And you're telling me that asher is only for rishus. So are you telling me that if a person needs it to make himself tameh, for example, a meis mitzvah where you mechuyev to be metameh yourself in order to bury the meis mitzvah, then if you subsequently went into the Beis Hamikdash, you're not going to be chay of kares? We know that's not the case. The Gemara answers, that is a special pasuk. The word asher taka only, if it would only say the isha shayitma, you'd be right. Only a rishus. The word asher only implies a rishus. By meis mitzvah, we have a different pasuk. Originally, the Gemara tries to say from Tamayiyah and asks from that, and ultimately says it's from the pasuk of Oitumas. From these psukim, Meis Mitzvah is included in the Issachari's. Somebody that is a Tomei, person who's Tomei from Meis Mitzvah is included in the Issachari's of going to the Beis Hamikdash. But really, were it to only say the word Asher, Asher actually implies you're involved in an optional activity. You're so choosing to do something, and therefore, going back to the case of Yar, Asher Yavis Rebbe Yar implies that you're going into the forest out of your own volition, of your own choice. There's no mitzvah involved in the situation. That is the end of Amud Aleph. Monday's class, Monday's Shiur, and now we move on to a summary of the Amud Beis, which we learned today. So there's the Ikad Masilaha, which Ikad Masilaha means that the same or the similar discussion between Rabbi and Rabbi, between Rabbi and Rabbi, about whether what's exactly the category of Rishus and a mitzvah wasn't spoken about in the context of Chiyuv Galus, but rather in what type of Harisha and Kitzira, or what type of Kitzira to be more accurate, is Asr and Shabbos. Okay? What type of Kitzira is Asr and Shabbos? The Gemara is going to say that it's only a Kitzira of a mitzvah, of a Rishus, which is Asr and Shabbos, and the Kitzira of mitzvah, the mitzvah of Kitzira So'ima, which is a mitzvah, is Taka Mutter on Shabbos. But let's just see the Brisa which tells us this, and then we'll have the discussion which will mirror the discussion of the previous one. The Gemara basically says that the Brisa says as follows. There's a pasuk which says B'charish B'katz Tishbeis. The pasuk is talking about Shabbos, but then adds that you should rest on Shabbos, and then adds B'charish B'katz Tishbeis, which doesn't superfluous. You just told me to rest. What do you mean B'charish B'katz? You're specifying these two malachas. So Rabbi Shmuel, there's two approaches in the Brisa. Rabbi Kiva says it's talking about Shemitah. It can't be talking about Shemitah itself because we know you're not allowed to work on Shemitah from other psukim. Rather, it's talking about the Harish of Erev Shemitah and the Kitzira Moitz Shemitah. That's what it's talking about. Harisha, which is preparing for Shemitah, and the Kitzira, harvesting that which grew in Shemitah, that it's included in the dinim of Shvis. You're not allowed to plow, you're not allowed to, and if you harvest, it's got the din of Shemitah. That's Rabbi Kiva's approach. Rabbi Shmuel says no. It's Taka talking about Shabbos. Why do you need to tell me B'charish B'katz Tishbeis? So he says, it's Taka not telling me the din that you're not allowed to be B'charish B'katz, that we know. Rather, it's telling me what type of Harisha, what type of Kitzira is Taka Asa. Dumya de Harisha, meaning the fact that it says B'charish B'katz Tishbeis is coming to tell me B'charish, just like the Harisha, which is Asa, is a certain type of Harisha, so too the Kitzira is also that type of Kitzira. What we're talking about. Harisha Rishus. Just like Harisha plowing the field is always Rishus. There's no musig. It's now going to explain the Brisa now. There's no musig of a Harisha of a mitzvah. So too, the Kitzira, which is Asr Shabbos, only refers to Kitzira of a Rishus. Kitzira, which is your choice, which you're deciding to do. But a Kitzira, where there's a mitzvah involved to do it, is taka not included in the Issa of doing work on Shabbos. And you're allowed to do Kitzira Sa'aymer on Shabbos. That's what the Brisa says. Now the Gemara asks, the Kasha, which this is the mirroring of the previous Amud, where the Homi Rabbanan asked the Rava, just a second, why are you telling me that you're telling me the Kitzira of mitzvah is excluded because the Kitzira has to be doing the Harish, and the Harish is always Rishus. What do you mean Harish is always Rishus? Harish can also be a mitzvah. Plowing the field in preparation for the Omer, in growing in preparation for the Omer. So the Gemara says again two answers. First of all, the similar answer we said earlier, the same answer basically, just substitute the word Chatalas Eitzim for Harisha, that since if you found the field plowed, there will be no mitzvah to plow a field, the same mitzvah is Kitzir So'ima. So it comes out the Harisha is not really a mitzvah, it's just a Hechatimtzi, it's something you need to do if necessary. It's a Hechsher mitzvah, it's a preparation of mitzvah, it doesn't have a category, it doesn't fall into the category of mitzvah. And Taka, there's no musik of a Harisha of a mitzvah, and therefore we learn from there that Kitzira, which is Asr Shabbos, is only the Kitzira of Rishus, but not Kitzira of mitzvah. On this, Rabbeinu asked Rava, just a second, our Mishnah implies otherwise, meaning our Mishnah Makkos. Yotav Makkos, maybe Rabbi Talmid implies the Ovid Makkos, but he's also just he needs to hit his son because he needs him to behave. But if he's behaving, there'll be no need to hit him. So it's also like just a hechsher mitzvah of chinuch, right? So the Gemara answers what it answered earlier. That's not true. There is taka mitzvah to hit your child, even if he's behaving. It's not something which is just necessary. Like if necessary, it's always good once in a while to hit your child and yasa bin chavi anichacha. And that's how we answer the kasha from the Mishnah. And finally, Hadam Rava says a different teretz meaning to the original question that we had, right? The original question that Harisha, how do we know we're talking about Harisha, that Ketzira Dumi, the Harisha, that Ketzira of a mitzvah is excluded? So originally we learned because there's no musik of Harisha mitzvah. Now Rava says, no, even were you to have a musik of Harisha mitzvah, even if Harisha Zayim was considered a mitzvah, at the end of the day, Ketzira of mitzvah would be excluded. Why? Because at the end of the day, the Harisha of a mitzvah is only going to be in a case where you don't have a field plowed. So we apply that to Ketzira and say, look, at the end of the day, the only type of Harisha that ever could be on Shabbos is a situation of imotza charosh ein charosh. If you had it plowed, there'd be no mitzvah to do charisha. And therefore we applied that to Ketzira. That the only level of mitzvah of Ketzira Sa'ima, which is included, even if we are including mitzvah in the Isser Shabbos, is a type of mitzvah where if you you don't necessarily do it. If you don't need to do it, then you don't do it. But the Ketzira Sa'ima, there's the passage which says clearly mitzvah liktzah lahavi tzartam et Sa'ima, that you take after, even if you have harvested, even if you have something which is harvested, you still need to.
No.
Huh?
No, that's
huh?
No, so we're not
okay. So it's a mitzvah l'havi. There's a mitzvah to be kaitzer, and therefore we can't include ksira of mitzvah because the ksira is not comparable to farisha, because you never have a situation where farisha has to be done even if you found matzah chash. Then we just next Mishnah. The Mishnah says of goyla lidei ben goyla lidei ha'av. Which means that a father who kills a son is chayav galus, and a son who kills a father is also chayav galus. That's the first part of the Mishnah. Next part of the Mishnah is that basically a yid who kills, or somebody who kills a yid gets galus, besides for ger toishav, meaning to say that a yid who kills a ger toishav doesn't get galus. Yid who kills a ger toishav doesn't get galus. That's basically second in. And finally, a ger toishav who kills a yid doesn't get galus. Ger toishav ain't a goyla ela ger toishav. So now the Gemara first of all deals with, and we'll leave the case of today we'll just deal with the Av and the Ben, meaning the father who kills the son and the son who kills the father. First of all, the Gemara asks a kasha, you're telling me a father who kills the son is goyla. Obviously, you're not talking about a situation where the father just happens to be in the field, in the forest, and kills the son by accident. That's not a father and a son, there's no havamina that he shouldn't get galus. He's just like anyone else. The Mishnah which says Al Goyle Dei Ben is obviously talking about a situation where the father is dealing with his son as a son. He's educating him, he's hitting him for the purpose of education, and he's getting golos. And if that's the case, it's the steer to what we learned in the previous Mishnah that Ava Makkos when he doesn't get golos. It's a steer. So the Gemara answers. First of all, the answer is no. We're talking about a father educating his child where there's no mitzvah involved because he's teaching him a trade. He's teaching him shuli denag. He's teaching him how to be a carpenter. The Gemara challenges that by saying that's also a mitzvah because it's a mitzvah. Like you see in the Gemara Kiddushin, there's a mitzvah to teach your child a trade. So it's parnassus. The Gemara answers we're talking about a situation where the father is teaching him something else. He's not educating him. He's not being a good father. But he's teaching him some other parnas which he doesn't need, and then he hits him where there's no mitzvah involved in such a situation, so therefore he's going to get galus. The previous Mishnah was talking about where either he's teaching him Torah or he's teaching him the original umnus, which he needs for his parnas. Then we discussed the case of a ben who kills his father. Right? The Mishnah says a ben who kills his father also receives galus. And the Gemara says a stira that we see in a brisa otherwise. Brisa learns out of a pasuk pratna makah that a maki of him, which the Gemara understands now to mean somebody who kills his father, doesn't get galus. So, stira, Mishnah says son who kills father gets galus. Brisa says doesn't get galus. So, originally, the Gemara is going to give two answers. Answer number one is it's the Makkos to know. The Taka, the Mishnah is the Rabbanon. The Rabbanon say that Ben who kills his father just like anyone else gets galus, and the Brisa is Reb Shimon who holds that no. A ben who kills his father doesn't get galus. Why would a ben who kills his father not get galus? So we explain like this. A ben who kills his father, besides for killing him, is also making a chabura. He's also wounding him, at least in usual circumstances. So we know that Makkah Aviv, in this week's Parish Mishpatim, Makkah Aviv, Mois Yomas, he gets Misa. What Misa does a Makkah Aviv get? In other words, Makkah Aviv meaning just makes a chabura, he hits his father. He gets chenek. Somebody who kills somebody else gets sayah. So the question is, somebody who kills his father and does both, which Misa is he going to get? So really, this is telling the Makkos of Shimon Rabban and Masech Sanhedrin, which is more chamo, chenek or sayef, strangulation or the sword. Rabbanon holds that sayef is more chamo than chenek, and therefore, if somebody kills his father, even if he makes a chabura, he's just going to be treated like anyone else who kills. Get sayef, that's the more chamo punishment. Reb Shimon is going to say no. Somebody who kills his father, we don't care about the fact that he killed. That's sayef. The more chamo dikar punishment is the chenek for being makkah ovid. That being the case, so the mazid, so you have to, so someone who kills but mazid his father, Reb Shimon will say you get chenek because that's the more strict of the two averis that he committed, and the Rabban would say chenek. Sorry, Rabbanu say Saif. Reb Shimon say Chanek. Rabbanu say Saif. So Rabbanu say Saif is just like any other person who kills. There's no reason not to get galus. Reb Shimon, who says that he gets Chanek because he's a Makkah of it, because he made a Chabur in his father, and that's the more severe sin, and that's the more severe Einish, is going to say that just a second, galus was created for the minor, for Shoigeg, for the minor sin of killing somebody. But the more chamur sin, the more chamur einish of Makkah of it, which gets chanek, that you can't give galus in such a situation. In other words, since at the end of the day, somebody who kills his father is also making a chabura, so therefore he's not going to be able to get galus, and that's the brayso. Right? So the brayso is Reb Shimon, and the Mishnah is Rabbanan, and according to Rabbanan, son who kills his father gets galus. That's answer number one. The final answer is an answer given by Rava, which says that no, meaning that we can say that both the Mishnah and the Brayso is the Rabbanan. The Brayso says you don't get galus by Makkah of it. It's not talking. Medaik in the Lashon doesn't say someone who kills his father. It says someone's a Makkah of it. Meaning that the Mishnah is telling me that the son who makes a chabura doesn't kill his father, just makes a wound, doesn't get galus. Straight away, what do you mean? Obviously, he doesn't get galus. Galus is only for killing. Well, answer I might have thought that Makkah of it, since Makkah of it is also chayav misa, just like somebody who kills the shoygeg, kills the mezid. Sorry. So the shoygeg should get galus. Mashmalon no. Makkah nefesh, you have to mamish be Makkah nefesh. Right, according to this pshat, the Makkah nefesh is more kipshutim. Makkah nefesh prat the Makkah aviv. He's taking up Makkah nefesh. He doesn't kill him. He's just inflicting a wound. So that's what we're up to. And next we'll continue with Akol Gon on the Yisrael.